Greetings and welcome. We are in Senior English A, and our objective now for the hour is to actually step outside of your textbook for just a moment and to deal with Francis Bacon. Let's give a little bit of background information because this cat is really important. Yesterday we talked about the differentiation of the value spheres, the coming of the Enlightenment after the Renaissance, and all of that is in many ways understood through the great work of Francis Bacon. Bacon is an early philosopher / government official / most importantly scientist who is really just one of these really brilliant guys. I mean, we just finished talking about Milton, and now all of a sudden we hit a guy who may actually be brighter than Milton. Bacon, you know, he has his PhD from Trinity, Cambridge by the age, I think it was 13. He spoke 7 different languages by the age of 10. He read and wrote in all of these different languages. He was what we would today call homeschooled, very much like Milton, and his education was prodigious. He was a terrific reader. And in fact, in some circles, though quite dubious probably, there's actually debate about who actually wrote those plays that we attribute to Shakespeare, and at times Francis Bacon's name gets associated with that. Do you know this argument? That there's really not a Shakespeare as we know of him, but Shakespeare is a name that was associated with the plays that were written, because at the time it was kind of like not a really good thing for your rep to be involved in the theater. And so maybe somebody like Francis Bacon wrote those plays and then put Shakespeare's name to them. This debate goes on, but we should point out that when Stanford a few years ago tried to figure out who's the brightest person who ever lived, they kicked it into a large computer, and the first name that came out after a few weeks of this data crunching was actually the German writer Goethe, who we'll talk about with the great classic text Faust, and number 2 was Francis Bacon. How does he die? Well, this is fascinating. Bacon's always doing this research that we would call scientific. And so he has this idea about refrigeration of meat as being a way to save the meat. Remember, in Bacon's day, we don't yet refrigerate. We don't have refrigeration. The only way you can keep meat from spoiling is to pack salt and junk like that on top of it. So Bacon goes out and he buys a bunch of chickens and he kills them, and it's snowing kind of like it is today, and he's out in his backyard and he's putting these chickens in different places and depths of snow to try, and then he's recording off of his little, Chekhov sheet. You got me? I mean, you can imagine the next door neighbor, Edith, looking out the window with rollers in her hair and saying, uh-oh, Francis is at it again in the backyard doing some wacky thing. And sure enough, he's got chickens all the way from, deep in the snow, up on the top of the snow, to inside next to the fire. And he's kind of checking, this kind of thing. And at some point in the night, he takes a cough. A few days later, he's in bed, and a few days after that, he dies. Tragically, he dies. But are you ready for this? You'll never forget this one, I guess. The next time you think about Francis Bacon, you can think about eggs and bacon. Oh, wait, because eggs come from chickens. I was just helping you to get the joke. Okay, so that's as good a joke as I can come up with today as we introduce Francis Bacon. Now, what makes Bacon so important? And inexplicably, well, I cannot imagine why he's not in a lit textbook for seniors. He invents the essay, as you understand the essay. The essay that you have to write, that 5-paragraph thing that we start out with as freshmen, and of course by the time we're seniors it obviously expands. The idea that you would write in prose to deliver some kind of explanatory information, what we call the expository essay, Francis Bacon invents that concept. Well, think about it. We've been working chronologically, have we not? After our study of Plato, think about how little essays you've had to read in this class. Think about that. Now, is that because, the essays that were just not that good? No. See, there weren't any essays for a very long time, as you understand the essay. In many ways, Francis Bacon will invent these essays. And the classic essay of all essays to introduce is his famous essay of studies. Now, why is that interesting? Well, because this was a guy who loved to study. We're told he could go in and sit in a library for 10 hours and just not even move. He was this kind of intellect. He could study for really focused, intensive periods of time. Now, many years ago, when I first came to Welland High School, I was challenged by a student. If you had to pick one essay to teach students, what would that essay be? And I, without even thinking, I just immediately said Francis Bacon's of Studies. I mean, it just makes sense to me that that would be the essay. Because I can do a lot in a few minutes with this essay. For example, notice it can lay on one sheet of paper So your instincts might be, if you haven't read it, to say, oh, this will take me all of 5 minutes to read. But for those of you who sat down and actually tried to read any of this, you immediately are met by the dense prose of this cat. But it would make sense if he has this amazing IQ, he's this brilliant guy, and he sits down to write about the thing he loves the most, studying. It obviously is going to be predictable that maybe what he has to say is going to be a little bit more complicated than it just looks on the page. The second thing, and for many years at the 1010 level, I lectured this essay to students, and in the very first session, to just talk about how to learn how to read an academic essay. And so we're going to do that now. And as we look at this essay, I'm going to suggest to you there are in kind of creative ways to annotate. Okay? And one of those is to take whatever's in your textbook, whether it be in psychology or in biology, especially in the math sciences, in your engineering or whatever, and you've got to take the information that you're reading and you've got to put it in some kind of, now I'm going to use an academic term, schemata or diagram that can make sense of what it is you're reading. Notice yesterday at the end of my lecture on differentiation of the value spheres, I had quite a bit of ink spilt on this whiteboard. I've had one or two of my honor students who go on to university. The first thing they do when they get ready to set up their dorm room is to go out and buy one of these whiteboards. And they actually put it on their wall. And then they play games as they go through readings of textbooks, where they actually take the information and try and rewrite it on the whiteboard. That's esoteric. So let me explain it to you by actually demonstrating it to you, okay? So I've designated my reader for the hour as being Mr. Armstrong. Mr. Armstrong's going to be reading, but can I say out loud, Mr. Armstrong, in advance, I'm going to be very rude and insult you by interrupting you. Okay, so please don't get mad, just get even. So here we go, Francis Bacon's of studies, and what I recommend that you do right now is maybe not so much do what I do on the paper, although you can if you like, but more, this is a demonstration. So I would say just watch me. Just watch and listen. Do you got me? And what I'm trying to do is maybe demonstrate to you how to work with some esoteric ideas, all right? So Mr. Armstrong is going to begin for us, and if I'm working, for example, on my whiteboard, which I will be, and I'm going to annotate this essay, Studies Serve for Delight, for Ornament, for Ability. Go ahead, Mr. Armstrong.
Studies serve for delight, for ornament, and for ability.
And right away, I'm going to point out to you, see, I told you I'd interrupt you, sorry about that. And right away, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to recognize that Bacon loves his trinities. Lots and lots of writers to follow will follow this. There's always going to be these tripartite things. Did you notice this happening with Plato as well? He likes his threes. Writers in the academic world like their threes. And so the minute you see this kind of thing, you're going to immediately want to pause and recognize I can create a chart. And if I can create a chart, that's a mnemonic, a way to remember. That's maybe some way I can remember. So notice what he says. Studies, he says, will serve, and then he's going to say, for what? Delight, for ornament, and for ability. Okay? And then go ahead. Their chief use, go ahead.
Their chief use for delight is in privateness and retirement.
And all of a sudden I realize, I get it. He's going to tell me that studies are good for something before he tells me what studies are. This is kind of like good advertising that will try to tell you you need something before they actually tell you what that something is. Okay? Studies serve, he says, for three things: delight, ornament, and ability. Their chief use in delight, he says, as in privateness and retiring. Now, what I suggest that you do is to follow the model that I'll give. Use first their words, then I like to draw like a little line, and then I'd like to put it in my own words. Does that make sense? So in other words, I'm going to put their words, so if it comes up on the exam, I can, use their language. But then I'm going to take their language and I'm going to put it in my own language, so I have some sense of what he's saying. The first thing he says that's useful about studies is they serve for delight as in privateness and retiring. And immediately, what do you think that means? Studying is good for when you are alone. What does it mean to retire? Some of you maybe heard this term used by your great-great-grandma. I think I'm going to retire now. What does that mean? It doesn't mean you're going to quit working. What does it mean? Yeah, right. I'm going to go to bed, basically. I'm going to relax. That is to say, Bacon is going to argue studies are very useful when you're all by yourself. Okay, and you've got nothing to do. That is to say, you need to kill some time. One way to do it is to study. Believe it or not, the idea of studying can become, for Bacon, delightful. It can actually be a way to kill time. But that's only the first reason why studies are of value. Let's go to the second one. Go ahead, Mr. Armstrong. Their chief use and delight is in privateness and retiring. Go ahead.
For ornament is in the disclosure. Discourse.
Yeah, now let's use that word. Go ahead, discourse.
And for ability is
We'll stop there. Discourse. So I write down the word discourse, but then I'm interested to know exactly what that means. Studies can help me do what? What does this mean, this word discourse? What does this word discourse mean? Yeah, talking, right, talking. So in other words, studies allow me to be a better talker. Whoa, what does that mean? Well, I was asked a number of years ago, what's the one thing that students at Worland High School really need to kind of struggle with and need to try to prepare for? And I said, I can say this, but I don't want to insult. But it's coming. This is the thing. You grow up in a town with 3 stoplights and 5,000 people. And here is what you're not yet ready to do. What you're not yet ready, for many of us, what you're not yet ready to do is to walk up to a complete and total stranger who you do not know. Put out your hand and say, hi, I'm to McGee. Who are you? Where are you from? Hi. Dude, we're not ready for this. We've grown up in a town where everybody we knew helped us get the jobs we got. We showed up at jobs and we didn't even have to apply. All we had to do was show up. Why come? Because somebody who knew us said, yeah, give them the job. We have never in our life had to walk up to a complete stranger, put out our hand and say, hi, who are you? But that's about the future for you. Unless it's not. Which maybe explains why so many people from small towns never actually leave. They go away, and then it hits them. Oh, I don't know anybody. What do I do when I'm in a totally strange foreign place and I don't know anybody? How do I just meet people? And the answer is, you gotta learn how to talk. Which is increasingly a lost art form for your generation. You only talk to the people you know. We got to learn how to talk to people we don't know. And one of the important ways to do that has to do with our talking. Now wait a minute. This word, ornament. Now I know what that is on a Christmas tree. You put it on to dress it up, huh? Right? What does it mean to say your talking needs to be increasingly ornamental? What does that mean? Well, see, now this is very interesting. Because there's some things about learning how to talk. I can share it this way. I was not raised for much of my life in the United States. I was raised outside of the United States. And when, as a young man, I returned to the United States, I discovered something very strange about you people. I discovered a few things strange about you people, but this is one of the things I really discovered that was strange about you people. And I didn't discover it anywhere else in the world, wherever I had been. This was kind of like unique to America. It goes something like this. Can I just say it this way? If I start talking to you like this, you immediately imagine I'm highly intelligent. Quite remarkable, actually. On the other hand, I talk to y'all like this. Y'all figure I'm about as stupid as a post. Live out there somewhere out there west of Abilene somewhere. Oh my gosh. Amazing. Now this only really happens in America. And as I kind of came to this culture, I was like, whoa. Because that's quite fascinating. Right? For example, I talk like this, y'all figure I'm stupid or something. I might have 3 PhDs, y'all still figure I'm as stupid as it can be. On the other hand, if I speak like this, you immediately understand it. You assume me to be highly intelligent. When I might be as stupid as can be. Now, here's what I would say about a culture like this. We make assumptions, can I say this? We make assumptions about people in this culture depending upon things like the way we speak. Or how about this one? So you're sitting there in the interview, this is coming, and the guy looks at you and says, so, the job interview. So, what are your thoughts about salary? Now, I should tell you in advance, this is a setup question, and you always want to stay away from it. So you just say back to the guy sitting on the other side of the table, the big table, you say, listen, here's the deal. I'm just going to leave the question of emolument to you. Now here, think about for a second, Bacon points this out. Think about what you just done to this cat. Who is the one with all the power? Well, obviously him. He's the one going to give you the job, right? But you've used the word emolument, which means salary. Right? You've used the word that he doesn't know. But he can't ask you what the word emolument means. Whoa, what was that word you just... Because the minute he asks you what the word emolument was, who's got the power? Right? So instead he's going to go, oh, okay, right. And then you're going to leave. And then he's going to look in his little desktop dictionary. He's going to look and see that the word emolument means salary. And he's going to go, oh, wow, he must be really smart. When maybe you were sitting out in the foyer reading Reader's Digest and you were doing one of those little word vocabulary things and they said emolument means salary. And for the very first time in your life, right? You walked in and you used it for the very first. But he's going to assume something about you. He's going to assume that you're highly intelligent because you've got a vocabulary. So this is what I've been saying to my students for a long time. If you live in a whacked out culture where people actually assume that a vocabulary means highly intelligent, then get a vocabulary. Right? That is to say, know how to talk. Start practicing it. See, and some of you will say, I can do that. Really? So today, I challenge you, find one person in this building, it may be hard, who you really don't know at all. It's probably easy if they're younger than you. Or it could be an adult who you don't know, and just walk up to them and introduce yourself. I dare you to try. And as you get ready to do that, go ahead and feel, your heart will start pumping, your hands will start trembling, and you're in this small community. What's it going to be like when you leave this place? Oh yeah, that explains why when everybody goes to the college or the university within the state, they all hang out with the people from their own town. Oh, that explains it. But here's the problem. As you go forward in your life, you're going to have to meet people who you do not know. You're going to have to exchange ideas with those people. And the way you will do that is through talking. The reason, by the way, that matters is the third thing Mr. Armstrong's going to read for us. As in ability, go ahead.
And for ability is in judgment and disposition of business.
Judgment and disposition of business. And then that's his words, but what does that actually mean? See, this is what I love about this cat. He says it this way. Look, here's the thing. If you want to have power, you got to learn how to work within systems. Right? Where can you gain power? Get in bank. So I make a suggestion to students. This is my suggestion. Some of my students have listened to this suggestion. Now I've been doing this long enough, and I could even point to some of them now and say, hey, they listen. And it runs something like this. It's a very simple suggestion. Go away to university and look at the next 10 years of your life, the university and beyond, and say the following. I'm going to work harder than everybody else. While everybody else is out partying, for example, I am going to save my money. While everybody else is wasting their time at university, I'm going to be working much harder than everybody else. And here's why. I'm going to make more money. I'm going to try to make as much money as I can in the next 10 years. And I do mean this. So I don't care what your major is. In the first year you're in college, try to take a class in investments. Why come? So whatever money you've got, you can learn how to invest it. Why would I do that? So that by the time you graduate, you can go in and buy your brand new car. And you can even do it with cash if you like. As one of my students did. They thought he was a drug dealer. He's like, I'm no drug dealer. I just don't like credit cards, so I'm going to pay you in cash. Is that all right? And the guy's like, where'd this come from? And he said, what do you mean where'd it come from? I worked 3 jobs while I was in school, so I could save my money. I didn't put it in a bank. There's no interest rate there. I figured out how to invest it. I did all right. So I'm suggesting to you, why not work really hard for 10 years and get positions of power? Once you're in those positions of power, you can change those institutions. This is Francis Bacon. Because knowledge is power. This is what Bacon says in another essay. Knowledge is power. If you know things, like the word emolument, you can use the word emolument. Do you hear what I'm saying, right? Of course, you live in a culture where people are easily influenced, right? They're influenced by a number of things, but they're certainly influenced by your knowledge. So I say, gain more knowledge. There is now, from this point in your life, no dumb class. No subject you don't like. no subject you won't learn. While everybody else whines and complains or goes and stones, you work harder than everybody else. Let them stone. It'll be fun. Down the line, you'll be the one that has what they don't. That's my suggestion. That's my suggestion. Use your time for the next 10 years. You work harder than everybody else and then gain positions of power. Think of it this way. How about this? When you were 5 years old, if your parents had come to you and said, we have 30 days to go anywhere in the world you want to go, name it. We're going to go there. We're going to live for 30 days. We're going to try the cuisine. We're going to travel. We're going to learn some of the language. We're going to, at 5. And every year after that, in the month of July, they had said to you, where you want to go now? Anywhere you want to go, we go. I have a question for you. If you had had that experience from the age of 5 to 15, would you be the same person right now that you are? See? And if you go, no, I would not, how would you be different? I mean, come on, dude, you'd still be basically the same DNA. The answer is, well, I'd have seen the world. Right. Now, for most of you, that did not happen. But I have an opportunity for you. Gain the currency so that when you have your first child, you can raise your child differently than you were raised. So that you can go to your child at the age of 5 and say, where you want to go? You know? I mean, I've heard Paris is nice this time of year. Let's spend 30 days in Paris. There's this great little restaurant. I won't get into it. See how that works? I have pals. He's Japanese. She's Chinese. They marry, both at Stanford, working on PhDs. They decide to raise their children, who they have, in different parts of the world. But they want their children to be educated. And so they have language days. So on Monday, they're only allowed to talk in the house in Chinese. On Tuesday, they're only allowed to talk in Japanese. On Wednesdays is English day, because of course you got to learn the language. And then on Thursdays, they'll use French, and on Fridays, you see what we're saying, right? No big shock. These children are growing up assuming everyone knows these languages. Everyone has this experience. Everyone travels like these kids do. No big shock. The first time they start taking standardized tests, kick the ever-living snot out of them. See how that works? Think about the way your life has been so much about, oh, I don't like that. This is indicative, isn't it, of small communities anyway? Oh, I don't like that. I don't like that kind of music. I don't like that kind of food. I don't like that, right? I even heard a student say the other day, why would I want to travel? Seriously? What's up with traveling? Okay? You can easily adopt that kind of provincial small-mindedness, and Bacon will say, your whole life lived in this small little cell that you think is the rest of the world. If, on the other hand, you begin to educate yourself, and don't confuse that with schooling, then you can accomplish two things at the same time. You can have lots of experiences, that's called fun, but you can also gain money, that's called power. And once you've got power, well, it's like this old fart said to me when I was quite young. He said, son, there's two kinds of people. Those who work for IBM and those who own IBM. Who will you be? It's an interesting observation, right? That is to say, try to find in any opportunity the advancement for yourself, both in terms of bank as well as knowledge, right? Of course, there's these humbling moments, right, that happen in your life. I hate to tell this story, but I will. I was on my way to university. I was very pleased with my life experiences to that point, and they told me to get a job on a construction crew, and so I was like, all right, fine. So, at least you get outside, you get to work in the sunshine, et cetera, et cetera. And they put me with this disgusting carpenter guy. He wore these bib overalls, and he had this huge thing of snuff in his, tobacco, spitting every beard. He kept spitting. I'm dodging him while he's spitting. By the second week, I kind of figured, this cat's actually a pretty good builder guy. I mean, he makes the cabinets or whatever, And I'm like, wow, it's kind of interesting. But during my breaks and during lunch, I'm reading my books to get ready for my university experience that's coming in the fall. And, off the cuff, he says, so, what are you doing, son? And I'm like, I'm reading. Really, what are you reading? I read a book every once in a while. And I said, oh, it's nothing that would interest you. It's a book on philosophy. Really, philosophy? I kind of dabble in philosophy. So, like, what Who are you reading? Oh, you wouldn't know. I said, it's a philosopher named Nietzsche. It's no big deal. He goes, oh, Nietzsche, I like Nietzsche. And I kind of look at him like, you know Nietzsche? And he goes, oh yeah, I lecture a class at Baylor every semester in the fall on Nietzsche. It's fun. I'm a PhD in philosophy. I just do this because I can make more money and I like to be out in the sun. I would only pray for you in your biography before you're 25 that you have such an experience. It's good to be humbled. It's really good to be humbled. You know, you just got this feeling that you're just like, right? Right? Think about the ways we look at people and we kind of assume things about them that we don't really know, but we just kind of assume because they live, they're a rancher in Hyattville, that means they don't know how to read, you know, this kind of, don't make that mistake. There's too many of those guys that are just unbelievably bright. I love talking to them. You know, it's an amazing thing, the number of people who you cross tracks with and you kind of assume something about them. So Bacon's suggestion is two parts. Let other people make all the assumptions that they want to about you, but don't make assumptions about other people so easily. Learn how to use studies to make bank. Now there is a problem here, and Armstrong's going to tell us what that problem is. To spend too much time, go ahead.
For expert men can execute and perhaps judge of particulars one by one. But the general counsels and the plots and marshalling of affairs come best from those who are learned.
I love the fact that he uses the term learned. That's your goal. That's your goal. Your goal isn't to get degrees. Your goal isn't really even to get money and power. In the end, your goal is to be learned. Why? Because then you can use the stuff you learn for your own advantage. In other words, do it better than you were raised. Right? And the only way you're going to do that is to be learned. Right? Don't condemn people around you who aren't learned, but try to excel and be better yourself. Now, there's some problems, some potential problems with study. Go ahead. To spend too much time, go ahead.
To spend too much time in studies is sloth.
Yeah, that's how we say that word. Good. Sloth. In other words, if all you ever do... I love this. This is a cat who's a bookworm, and I love it. He says, are you ready for this? You can go to college and study too much. You can go to college and spend all your time in a dorm room doing nothing but study, 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 study. You know these kinds of people, all they got to do, they're always studying, 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 studying. Bacon says, yeah, I don't want to do that. Because this is like being lazy of a different kind. Why? Because you're not living your life. You got to live your life. You got to have the experiences of life. Uh-oh, what about this thing about ornament? Good.
To use them too much for ornament is affection.
Now, affectation is his word. What's our word? Well, are you familiar with this? If you talk too much ornamentally, we sometimes call that, don't we? Right? You got to be careful, huh? You got to be careful, right? The way I like to say it is this. You got to be able to know when to use your knowledge and when to not use your knowledge. Are you familiar with that? How much time do I have? Okay. Are you familiar with that commercial, or with that car company named Porsche? They make beautiful cars. They're very fine cars. They used to make commercials. They don't do it as much anymore. One of my favorite commercials is this gentleman who's in a brand new, Porsche. And he's driving in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of like where we live, with with one stoplight. You've seen this maybe. Where it pulls up, and beautiful melodic. I think it's Chopin's playing. It's kind of melodic music. And then all of a sudden, this car pulls up next to him with these kids. It's a Trans Am, and there's smoke coming out the windows, and the kids have heavy Metallica music, like really heavy metal music, and they do one of these things like, "Come on, let's race," because they're at this red stoplight. And the stoplight turns from red to green, and all of a sudden you hear this like that, and the screen goes up with smoke, and then it comes back, and as it comes back, the car with the kids gone, completely gone. They're gone, and the music comes up again, and the gentleman, well-dressed gentleman, engages his Porsche and just takes off nice and slow. Nothing's been said, and then the screen goes blank, and words come up, and it says, "The power is in knowing. You don't always have to use it. Porsche, there is no substitute." See how that works? Nice, huh? In other words, why would he race against the Trans Am? He knows he can win. there's no point in it. You see what I'm saying, right? And I like to think about this in regards to studies. Just because you know what it means to talk about the Thrasymachon argument from Republic 1 doesn't mean you have to bring it up. Do you know what I mean? Do you know people like this? So, for example, they're at the party and, well, you know, it's kind of like the Thrasymachon argument. And, well, what did you just say? You brought it up intentionally to kind of make yourself look smarter. You have to be wise and judicious is his point. Don't overdo it. But there will come a point when you can use emolument and drive the point home. But you can't use emolument if you don't know emolument. See how that works? So you're always trying to gain knowledge. Of course, this thing about abilities, go ahead.
To make judgment wholly by their rules is human of a scholar.
And he likes that word, scholar, right? In other words, a scholar, and that's kind of an old term, but what he really means is not just somebody who knows stuff, but somebody who can use his or her knowledge to advance to get that right there. He finishes this essay. I'll let you read the rest of it on your own, but one of the interesting things about this essay is he says, think about it this way. If your gut starts bothering you, go to the doctor. What's the doctor do? Prescribes medication, right? Some kind of medicinal kind of work or whatever, pharmaceuticals of a certain kind or whatever, right? The same is true if you have mental deficiencies, right? So studying improves the mind and makes you stronger. And then he uses a really interesting Latin term that translated means studies develop into habits. I would circle that if it was me when I read this essay personally. Studies develop into habits. I've had students that put that line on their dorm wall. That is to say, you get better at this thing called being a student as you grow older if you work at it, right? As you work at it, okay? And there's a great challenge. So there you go, an introduction to Francis Bacon's Of Studies and a little bit of British accent to go with it, okay?
So, Mr. McGee,